The shelter smelled of dust and old metal. Rows of cages lined the narrow hall, filled with strange alien children, each one silent and waiting. The man walked slowly, his boots echoing on the cracked floor. He had not planned to be here today, but something inside him had pushed him through the heavy doors. The workers barely looked at him. Most people came once, stared at the cages, and left without a word. He passed a boy with green skin and too many eyes. Another cage held a girl with scales that shimmered faintly under the weak light. Some aliens clung to the bars, begging in broken words for someone to take them, but most just sat quietly, tired and hopeless. The man stopped near the end of the row, his breath catching in his chest. There she was. She was small, curled up in the corner of her cage. Her hair was tangled, her thin arms wrapped around her knees. Her skin had a pale glow, not bright, just faint enough to look unnatural in the shadow. She did not call out like the others. She did not even look up. The tag on her cage was blank, only marked with the word, unadoptable. The worker noticed him staring and shook his head. "Don't waste your time," he muttered. "That one's broken. No family lasts more than a week with her. They always bring her back, if they live long enough to return." The man frowned. "What do you mean?" The worker only shrugged, his face tight with unease. "Cursed. That's what they say." The man crouched down, pressing his hand gently against the cage bars. The girl stirred. Slowly, her head lifted and two wide eyes met his. They were not like any eyes he had ever seen. Deep pools of silver light, filled with sorrow so heavy it felt like it pulled at his chest. For a moment, the shelter went silent, as if even the air was waiting. She didn't speak. She didn't move closer. She only looked at him, and something in her gaze told him she had already given up on the world. His throat tightened. He knew that look. It was the same look he had seen in the mirror after the war, when he thought nothing was worth living for anymore. "I'll take her," he said quietly. The workers stared at him as if he were insane. "You don't understand. She's not like the others. Bad things happen around her. Families, he lowered his voice, they die." The man's jaw hardened. "Then I'll be the fool who tries anyway." The adoption papers were shoved at him with a trembling hand. Few people signed them, and fewer walked out alive after doing so. But he signed without hesitation, ignoring the whispers behind him. Soon the cage opened with a rusty screech. The girl did not move until he knelt in front of her. He held out his hand, palm open, showing no fear. For a long time she stared as if testing his heart. Then, with a tiny shiver, she reached out. Her fingers brushed his skin. The shelter lights flickered at that exact moment, a crackle running through the wires. The worker cursed under his breath, but the man did not let go. He wrapped his hand around hers and pulled her gently to her feet. She was lighter than he expected, fragile like a bird. The girl clung to his arm as they walked out of the shelter. Outside, the air was cold and the street empty. She kept her head down, silent, her steps barely making a sound. He spoke softly to her, telling her she was safe now, but she did not answer. When they reached his home, he gave her a blanket and a place near the fire. She sat there, unmoving, staring at the flames as if she had never seen them before. He brought her food, but she only pushed the plate aside. Hours passed, and still she did not speak. It was midnight when he awoke to the sound of creaking wood. He looked around the room, half expecting to see her gone, but she was still by the fire, wrapped in the blanket. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. For the first time, she turned her head toward him. Her lips parted, and in a voice so small he almost didn't hear it, she whispered a single word. "Papa?" The man froze. His heart pounded. She had spoken, and that one word carried all her fear, all her hope, and all her sorrow. He swallowed hard, moved closer, and touched her shoulder gently. At that moment, the lights in the house flickered, just like in the shelter. A shadow moved across the window, though no one was outside. The girl's eyes widened, and she gripped his arm with surprising strength. The night was no longer silent. Something was waiting for them in the dark. The morning after was quiet, almost too quiet. The man brewed tea in the kitchen, listening to the faint crackle of the fire where she still sat, wrapped in the blanket. She had not moved much through the night, only watching him with those silver eyes. When he placed a plate of bread and fruit near her again, she finally reached out. Her small hand trembled as she touched the bread, as if she expected it to vanish. Slowly she ate And though she did not smile, he noticed the fear in her shoulders soften just a little. Later, he tried to ask her name, but she only shook her head. Perhaps she had forgotten it, or perhaps it was something she did not want to share. He told her his own name, speaking gently, but she gave no reply. Still, her eyes followed him everywhere, as if she was making sure he would not disappear. That night, when he carried extra wood inside, the air outside felt strange. The wind carried whispers that didn't sound like the wind at all. Shapes flickered at the edge of the streetlights, moving too quickly to be shadows. He locked the door and pulled the curtains, but the feeling of being watched remained heavy in his chest. The girl noticed it too. She pressed herself close to the fire, her hands clutching the blanket tight. When he asked if she was afraid, she didn't answer, but he saw her lips moving silently, as if she was speaking to someone he could not hear. Around midnight, he woke again. This time, it was not the creaking of the house, but a faint murmur outside the window. He rose quietly, careful not to startle her, but she was already awake. She was staring at the window with wide eyes, her whole body stiff. He stepped closer, peering through the gap in the curtain. The street outside looked empty, but the sound was real. Low voices, speaking in a language he did not know. He backed away slowly. When he turned, he found her standing right behind him. For the first time, she reached up and touched his chest, right over his heart. Her fingers were cold but steady. Then she whispered, "They're here." Before he could answer, the lights flickered again. The air filled with a deep hum, like something massive moving through the night sky. The girl's silver eyes glowed brighter, and the shadows on the walls twisted unnaturally. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the fire as if the light could protect them. But the girl looked up at him, her face pale with terror. "If you keep me," she said softly, "you will die too." The words cut through the room like a blade. Outside, the whispers grew louder, closer, and the floor trembled beneath their feet. Something was waiting just beyond the door. The next day, the sky was gray, heavy clouds pressing down over the small house. He tried to pretend things were normal, making breakfast and fixing broken tools in the shed, but the girl's words echoed in his mind. "You will die too." She sat by the window, staring at the ground outside as if she expected something to rise from it. She had not spoken again, but her silence was louder than any warning. When she finally moved, it was to wash her hands in the basin. He almost dropped the hammer when he saw it. One of the scars on her arm shimmered faintly the moment water touched it. Thin lines spread across her skin, glowing like tiny rivers of light, and strange symbols appeared as if burned into her flesh. She yanked her sleeve down quickly, but not before he caught the look of shame in her eyes. He knelt beside her, speaking gently, asking what the marks meant. At first she shook her head, refusing, but then her shoulders sagged. "It's why they hunt me," she whispered. "It's why no one keeps me." Her voice broke as if the words themselves were too heavy. That night, while she slept near the fire, he searched old files and records on his tablet. He typed every description he could think of: silver eyes, glowing scars, cursed children. After hours, he found fragments of history buried in forgotten archives. Her kind had once been rulers of a great empire, but they were nearly wiped out because of what lived in their blood. Some said their energy could destroy entire fleets. Others said it opened doors to ancient machines. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear: she was the last of something powerful and feared. The fire dimmed, and the house felt colder as he read. He looked at her small frame curled under the blanket, so fragile and innocent, yet carrying a weight far older than him. He closed the tablet and sat silently, wondering if he had made a mistake or if fate had chosen him for this. The crack of glass shattered the silence. He jumped to his feet. A window at the back had splintered, but no rock lay on the floor. Only a strange smell of metal and smoke drifted inside. He rushed to the girl, but she was already awake, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She grabbed his hand, tighter than before, her voice shaking. "They always find me. Always." Her tears caught the firelight, making them look like liquid silver. He wanted to promise her safety, wanted to say he would never let them take her. But before he could, the sound of footsteps came from outside, slow, deliberate, circling the house. The girl buried her face against his chest, trembling. Her words came out like a plea and a warning both. "Please, don't die for me." Then, without warning, the lights went out. The entire house was drowned in darkness, leaving only her glowing eyes to cut through the black. The following evening, the street outside was not empty. He noticed them the moment he stepped onto the porch. Three figures dressed in long coats, their movements too smooth to be human. They did not knock, did not speak. They only lingered at the edge of the shadows, watching. When neighbors passed, the strangers melted into alleys, then reappeared again near his house, patient as hunters. Inside, the girl refused to move from the corner. Her eyes followed every creak of the floorboards, every shift of wind against the shutters. He tried to distract her with food, with gentle words, but she seemed to sense things he could not. Finally, she whispered, "They are not here for you. They are here for me." That night, he armed himself with an old rifle from the war. He sat awake in the chair by the fire, waiting, the girl asleep under her blanket. Hours dragged by. The hum outside grew louder, a rhythm like a machine breathing. Then came the sound of boots against the porch. The door rattled once, then again, and before he could rise, the girl cried out. Her body arched, her scars glowing with a sudden burst of light. Energy surged through the room, cracking the wood in the walls. The rifle slipped from his hands as a wave of invisible force knocked it across the floor. The strangers outside shouted in their alien tongue. The doorframe splintered, and a clawed hand reached in. He pulled the girl close, shielding her, but she pushed against him with surprising strength. "If I let it out, they will die," she said, her voice breaking. "But so will you." Her skin burned hot beneath his grip, her body trembling with the force trying to escape. The hum outside turned into a roar as more shadows gathered near the broken window. He could see their outlines now, tall, sharp, with eyes like black glass. They pressed closer, their whispers like knives in his ears. The girl looked at him, tears streaming down her glowing face. "I can't hold it much longer." He made a choice then. He lifted her into his arms, ignoring the heat radiating from her skin, and rushed through the back door into the freezing night. The air split with alien cries, weapons sparking in the dark. He ran without looking back, clutching her tight as she buried her face against his chest. The forest loomed ahead, a black wall of trees swaying in the wind. He didn't stop, not even when the first blast scorched the ground behind them. The girl whispered one last thing before her strength failed, her voice a mix of fear and warning. "They will never stop until I am gone." The forest swallowed them whole, branches clawing at his coat as he pushed deeper into the dark. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew sharper, metallic wings slicing the air, alien voices cutting through the night. He carried her against his chest, feeling her body shiver with every step. She was too light, as if hunger and fear had hollowed her out long before he found her. He stumbled over roots, his breath harsh in his throat, but he didn't stop. When he finally dared to glance back, he saw faint red lights weaving through the trees. Drones. They floated like predators, searching, patient, their beams sweeping the forest floor. He pressed her closer and whispered for her to stay quiet. They moved until his legs burned, until the weight of exhaustion dragged him down. At last, he spotted a narrow gap in the ground, a place where the earth had split long ago. He dropped into it, pulling her with him. The crack widened into a tunnel, damp and cold. He pressed his back against the stone, both of them hidden in the shadows as the red lights swept past above. For a moment, silence returned. He exhaled, trembling, but the girl's silver eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "This place remembers me," she whispered, her voice echoing against the walls. He turned, frowning, and noticed it. Strange markings etched into the stone, the same shapes that had appeared on her glowing scars. When her small hand touched the wall, the marks lit up, lines of light racing through the cavern like veins awakening after centuries of sleep. The ground trembled beneath them. She gasped and tried to pull away, but the symbols clung to her skin like fire. The tunnel stretched deeper, revealing a stairway carved into the earth. The glow lit their path, pulling them down into the heart of the cave. He followed because there was no choice. The forest above no longer belonged to them. As they descended, the air grew warmer, humming with a pulse that matched the beat of his heart. Strange machines half buried in stone flickered to life, their shapes alien, their designs older than any world he knew. The girl clung to his arm, her face pale. "It's inside me," she whispered. "The key they want. It's inside me." Before he could answer, a roar shook the cave. The pursuers had found the crack, their voices echoing as they crawled inside. Shadows stretched down the stairway, chasing fast. He pulled her behind a massive pillar of stone, gripping the rifle tight in one hand, her trembling fingers in the other. The walls around them pulsed brighter, as if responding to her fear. Then she looked up at him, her silver eyes glowing like molten steel. "If I let it out," she said softly, "I might never come back." The ground quaked as footsteps closed in, the hunter's only breaths away. She stood frozen, torn between unleashing the storm within her or letting them both be taken. The cave walls shook as the hunters poured inside, their weapons glowing with cold fire. He pulled her close, trying to shield her with his own body, but the pillars of stone began to crack under the assault. The humming in the air grew louder, deeper, until it felt like the whole world was trembling beneath their feet. The girl's scars blazed brighter than ever, streaks of light crawling up her arms and across her face. She clutched his shirt, terrified, whispering, "I can't hold it anymore." Her voice was both plea and confession. He looked into her glowing eyes and shook his head. "Then don't. I'll stay." The words broke something inside her. She stepped forward, her tiny frame standing between him and the advancing shadows. She raised her hands, and the cave itself responded. The markings on the walls erupted with light, flooding the chamber with a blinding brilliance. The hunters screamed. Their black armor melted under the surge of energy. The drones shattered mid-air, raining sparks across the stone floor. A storm of raw power burst from the girl, tearing through the cave like a living force. He could feel it burning against his skin, wild and unstoppable, yet it did not harm him. But the cost was clear. The girl's knees buckled, her body trembling violently as if the energy was tearing her apart from within. He ran to her, catching her just as she collapsed. Her silver eyes flickered weakly, the light inside them dimming. Around them, the machines hidden in the stone whirred to life, unfolding like ancient guardians awakened from sleep. Symbols glowed across the ground, forming circles of power that pulsed beneath their feet. He stared in awe, realizing they had stumbled into something far older than the hunters, something that had been waiting for her return. She reached up with shaking hands, gripping his collar. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I was never meant to survive. I was only meant to choose who does." Her words froze him. The machines thrummed louder, as if ready to answer her will. He shook his head, holding her tighter. "No, you're not leaving me." But her body sagged against him, fragile and fading. Above them, the roar of more voices echoed through the tunnel. The first wave had been destroyed, but more were coming. The light in the chamber dimmed as the girl's strength slipped away, leaving him clutching her against his chest, surrounded by ancient power and an enemy that would not stop. And in that moment, as he felt her heartbeat falter against his, the machines around them shifted. The glowing circles spread toward him, marking his skin with the same patterns that burned across hers. He refused to let her go. Her small body felt cold in his arms, her glowing eyes fading like dying stars. The machines roared around them, their symbols spreading across the walls and floor, reaching toward him as if demanding a choice. He pressed his forehead against hers, whispering, "You're not alone anymore. If they want you, they'll have to take me too." The circles of light flared, answering his words. Energy surged from the ground, wrapping around both of them in a blazing cocoon. The girl gasped, her breath shallow, and for a moment he thought she was slipping away completely. Then her scars pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, their lights merging until they burned with the same fire. The hunters stormed into the chamber, their weapons raised, but they stopped in horror as the air split apart. The machines bent their heads toward the man, not the girl. They bowed to him. The walls glowed with a single phrase written in symbols older than any empire: "Protector of the last one." The girl stirred in his arms, blinking in confusion. Her voice was faint but steadier than before. "You healed me." He didn't understand how, but he knew it was true. The power had flowed from him into her, binding them together. They were no longer separate. She was alive because he had chosen to carry her burden. The hunters tried to advance again, but the machines released a burst of blinding energy, forcing them to their knees. Some dropped their weapons, others fled into the tunnels. None dared step closer to the man holding the girl. She lifted her head, her silver eyes glowing with new strength. For the first time since he found her, she smiled, a fragile but real smile. She reached for his hand, gripping it tightly as though it was the only anchor she had in the world. He stood, carrying her toward the light pouring from the awakened machines. The cave opened slowly, revealing a path no one had walked for centuries. Behind them, the hunters whispered in fear, no longer predators, but witnesses to something greater than themselves. The man looked down at the girl in his arms. What began as an act of pity in a dusty shelter had turned into something far greater than adoption. He had not only saved her, together they had awakened a legend. And as they stepped into the light, the galaxy shifted, for no one had expected what came next.